Yeah, so again, welcome to Leading Through Ambiguity, and this is the brainchild of Sonia Penna, who's going to be setting up the boardroom for C-suite executives and professionals interested in HR and leadership, people and culture issues. We'll be delving into some hot topics every month with Sonia. So thanks for coming along, and before we hand over to Sonia, I'm going to go through a little bit about what BWA is all about. And I will talk first of all an acknowledgement of country. Wherever we might be, and we're from the East Coast to the West Coast, we acknowledge that we're all gathered on Australian land where First Nations people lived, worked, danced, cared for and celebrated for over 60,000 years, and we pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging. We acknowledge and support our Indigenous sisters in business. So I declare our meeting open. And I'll share with you what the BWA vision is. We came together about 4 or 5 years ago as a local group and thought, how do we make our collective national and a place where everyone's valued and we contribute to the greater good? We demonstrate new ways of doing things as a #1 collaborative community in Australia, and we're focused very much on the success of women in business. One of the things that does set us apart, I think, is the fact that we do more intimate kind of boardroom style events. We organise groups and tables to go to some of the big corporate entertainment things that are on with business women around the country. We love that, but we're really focused on creating a community and a network that really work together and share our knowledge. So really getting our leaders to be prepared to delve into the hot topics and make a difference. So our vision is really achieved by helping each other at a ground level achieve goals and dreams, and building a network of influence nationally and across sectors so that we're creating those opportunities and increasing the visibility of women in business. So who makes up the collective? Well, there's obviously business owners and entrepreneurs, but directors, executives and managers actually make up a bigger percentage of our membership. Professionals and consultants from across legal, accounting, architecture, engineering also make up some of our membership, and women on boards and in C-suite. So Sonia sort of came to the idea that it'd be great to have some very high level strategic discussions around people and culture issues for leaders. So I think that's really come out of looking at the fact that there's a real need for this, and it was before actually COVID. So we've launched it, I think, at a really great time, which has given everyone an opportunity for this to be as a webinar format rather than just something that's being hosted in Brisbane and Sydney, which is what we had been doing up to now with Sonia. So everyone gets to have a piece of Sonia, so that's great. So our focus on professional development areas are in leadership, business improvement, personal growth, influence and profile, and obviously connecting. We share our values across the important areas of inclusion and diversity. Any women in business is welcome, no matter where they are in their business life cycle or where they are in their career. We're very courageous. We try out new things. Quite often we have a crack at something. They don't always work, but we're very built on the idea of having a go and learning from what we do. Honesty and collaboration, obviously key areas of working together on these types of things. So we really sort of very true to working within the behaviours of our values. So a lot of my members will tell me when they don't agree and pull me up on things that they think that we might be going off kilter or in terms of my behaviour. So certainly that's something about our community, is that we are very honest. The one that I think is really important at the moment is this conscious care, you know, really being present to what's going on and to what people are feeling around us as women in leadership roles. I think it's really important that we are conscious and looking after our own care as well, our own health and well-being. And so that we can be providing that bit of positivity in the energy that people are looking for from leaders at the moment, and having some element of optimism while being realistic, I think, in terms of where we're at. But we can delve into that later with Sonia. So joining, for those of you who are not members, we'd love you to consider becoming a member. All our events at the moment are online. There's a lot going on. They're all free for members and anyone considering membership. And you can be considering membership for as long as you like. But if you do come on board, we love for members to actually become financial members, because that helps us pay our contractors. We have a really busy little team. It's a lean canvas, this group, but they work hard in the background, getting all the events up, promoting them, dealing with all the infrastructure that has to happen to make these kinds of communities work. So that's where all the fees goes, to supporting that. Another benefit of being a member is having a website, having your directory listing on our BWA website so that we can find you. It's out to the public. It's not hidden like a lot of other community groups. We actually think one of the most important parts of what we do is making it very visible in terms of who our leaders are, so that anyone can find leaders in their fields. And there's also means for those of us who have their own businesses, there's a backlink to your own website as a directory. It's a very highly ranked directory on Google, so it's a good link to get. I think some members just join for that purpose. But we have a whole lot of different things, including obviously the boardroom banters, roundtables, and the business workshops. But we do social events as well. We've had some lovely social events. In fact, one of our members is an exporter of beautiful wine from Great Southern and had planned to do a wine tasting in Brisbane, but that was cancelled due to all the restrictions in travel and COVID. So we'll have to reinstate that next year for those of you who are in Brisbane. Joe did one in Sydney earlier in the year, but went down really well. For those of you who love social media and busy on social, we have a free LinkedIn group called Business Women Australia. We've got 2,700 members of women in there, and a lot of women share what their events are, offer discounts to things, share articles. I think there's a lot of visibility, not a huge amount of engagement, but certainly it's another great platform to share what you're doing and to see who's in our community. We're also obviously got our website, a company page on LinkedIn, Facebook public page, and a private members group. We're on Twitter and we're on Instagram. So that keeps our digital team very busy. We've got wonderful partners and sponsors that help us do what we do. And sitting here, we've got Donna Vincent, who's Solo Accounts, so a great partner and a sponsor of Business Women Australia. Donna and her team are busy with all our accounts and our invoicing, and that's no small task, and that is done as an in-kind sponsorship. So we really are thankful to Donna. Plus, she also is the lead and the MC on quite a few business seminars that we run, and has been holding some boot camps for us on bookkeeping, which has been really valuable. Catco Enterprises have been working on a new website which is about to be launched, and our various other sponsors and partners in there also help us get things underway and support us in what it is we're trying to achieve. So if you're interested in joining and you want to have a chat to me, or you've got an idea for how you want to collaborate, or if you want to co-create something together with us, just let me know. Our events calendar is very busy. April, May, we've got a lot coming up. As you can see, yesterday we had WA Agricultural Women of the Year, Belinda Lay, on a mastermind talking to us about innovation in agriculture, which was an absolutely fascinating discussion. Today we've got the launch of the HR Boardroom, which will be every month with Sonia Penna. On Friday, if you feel like jumping onto Zoom, if you aren't all zoomed out by the end of the week, have a drink with me. It's just a free fall, bit of a wind down, bit of silly nonsense to end after work. I think it's dinner time for East Coast people, but that's kind of fun. So join me online for that. We've got Facebook for Business for those of you who are business owners or are in marketing roles for your businesses, with Kathy. Kathy's our digital engagement manager. She's a great lover of Facebook engagement for business, so it would be a good chance to pick her brains. And then Brisbane-based Jackie Walford, who's got a background in professional services marketing, She's been working a lot in her career with lawyers and accountants and architects, but she's going to talk to us about how to use LinkedIn Sales Navigator for business-to-business marketing, and that one's actually proving to be quite popular. Obviously online, so plenty of room if anyone wants to jump on that. And then over in May, we've got, of course, our Friday Free Falls continuing. Our next mastermind with Pauline Bright is going to have the host, as host, we've got the wonderful Amber Daines, who's Sydney-based PR media guru, and Amber will be talking about how we can utilise media to raise our visibility, and how do we pitch to media to get our stories heard. And then we have Donna hosting Natasha Lee, who's an accountant, and will be, that's on Show Me the Money, so all about capital raising and getting hold of finance to grow and scale your business. Early Birds with Tracy Ward. She's a mindset executive coach. She's a psychology background, and she'll be talking about the boundaries that you need to set in your life to be successful. Setting boundaries is something that we find as women. Research shows that women find it really hard to set boundaries. We tend to be conciliatory and try and please. Tracy's got some really interesting things to share that might be of value, especially if you're a leader, and you can see that happening with members of your team. It's not necessarily females, but it's predominantly a female trait, apparently. My husband wouldn't agree with that. But then we've got on the 12th, we've got Marketing Online Roundtable with Becky Sangster, and we have a real deep dive. It's called a rapid brainstorming session. If you haven't done one before, just the experience of it is amazing as a tool. It's fantastic. So hope we can see you there. If you want to join as a member and you want a directory listing, come in as a classic member, $299 for 12 months. Everything online is free for members. So it's awesome value. It's never been better value. So if you can afford it, we'd love you to join. If you can't afford it, we still want to see you in the boardroom. No pressure at all. Our premium members work with us in the background. They pay more for more work. They're sort of bigger investors in what we're all about. So if you are wanting to be a part of our leadership team and to help us actually be a part of the program that we're developing and invest at a high level, we'd love to hear what your thoughts are. So jump on to my phone, send me an email if you've got an idea or questions. I'd love to talk to you. We've got a great group that had registered for this, so it'd be awesome to get more involvement. So that's enough about me. Over to Sonia. Sonia Le Penna's got an absolutely exemplary professional background as a senior HR executive in corporate environments. She works with CEOs, with C-suite teams. She's an executive coach. She's a real disruptive thinker too, and a beautiful, generous soul. So I'm sure you've all read about her if you don't know her, but I will hand over now to Sonia.
Thank you. So I need to be able to share my screen with all of you. Thanks, Lynn. Can I see you? Here we go. Where? I've lost you.
We can see you.
Oh, what can you see? Can you see?
I can see people, but no screen. So if you go up to share, or go down to the green button and share screen.
Yeah. Because I'm between two screens, I'm going to just go one screen so that way I can see you come up. Oh, what's happened? Sorry, it will appear.
While you're finding your screen, how about we get everyone to check in?
Yes, that's a great idea.
Donna, do you want to say hello and a little bit about what you do?
Hi everyone, lots of new faces here, so that's really nice. I have developed a very simple bookkeeping system for Australian sole traders. So where your standard accounting package is too complex and too expensive these days, for sole traders, I've developed something that takes no accounting background to use. So that's my piece.
Excellent. Thanks, Donna. Jane Crombie.
Thanks, Lynn. Well, I'm here because I know Sonia, we studied together over the last few years. I work in financial services and investment research, but currently transitioning to a director career, and also have a strong interest in culture of organisations. And I did my MBA thesis on ethical culture for boards as competitive advantage. So I've developed a bit of a consulting methodology with Directors Australia, and we're just trialling that at the moment and looking to see where that might take us. So a few balls in the air.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. We might have to get you on for a mastermind at some stage. Anita, we've got the Northern Lights for. You're on mute.
My apologies. Hello. I'm not in HR, but I'm in the events industry, which has been decimated. So I have a lot of free time, and I got your invitation and thought I'd jump on because I'm webinar junkie at the moment. So that's why I'm here, just to learn whatever it is that you're going to teach us.
Where are you based? Where are you?
I'm in Sydney, in my office, in my home.
Lynn, you're on mute.
How about Claire?
Thanks, Lynn. Hi everyone. I'm Claire Fernando. I run my own research and analytics agency. So I do a lot of measuring marketing effectiveness and consumer insight. Some of it's dropped off at the moment, some of it's on pause. But for some industries, they've actually, it's heightened their interest in investing more in R&D. So it's a bit of a mixed bag for me at the moment.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Sounds interesting. We might have to learn a bit more about that too. How about Deborah Taylor? Are you, can you unmute?
Yes, I'm here, just getting myself off mute. Hi everybody, Deborah Taylor. I've got a background in starting up companies and running companies and selling them. So I've done about a dozen startups over the last 30 odd years. I now have currently 2 startups. One is called OpenSparks. It's a software platform as a service, and we run loyalty programs for large enterprise organisations. So we integrate globally with the schemes, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, any payment gateway that captures a transaction. We can get that data and run rules on that data to provide a reward or offer back to the consumer. And our first program was actually in the Philippines. That's now on hold because all the shopping malls are closed. There was a big 30 shopping mall centre that launched November last year. And my other business is Pax Technology. I've got a background in dealing with actual hardware like ATMs and banking equipment. I used to take obsolete equipment out of the banks and then sell it offshore, etc., or refurb it and sell it back into the Australian market. So I've got another company that imports an Android point of sale device, and that's out of China. So I've got a couple of hats I'm wearing now. So good to be on this call and meet everyone.
Fantastic, good to have you here, Deborah. And what about Claire Nader? Do you want to do an intro?
Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. Not many people do. So I am a HR business partner and currently work for a not-for-profit organisation that has a significant number of aged care facilities across Queensland and Victoria, as well as areas in child protection, disability and what have you. So at the moment it's very interesting. There are lots of forums and conversations that are taking place as a result of COVID-19, obviously, particularly because we have those aged care services and what we need to do. And conversations that, generally speaking, as a HR practitioner, I wouldn't have been involved in, but because our people are becoming so crucial at the moment and making sure that they're well and they're able to provide the service to our clients, doing everything I can to really take in information around what we could do, how we could coach our leaders through this time as well. And then Sonia connected through LinkedIn yesterday because I previously worked with Sonia and suggested to attend, so I thought this might be worthwhile.
That's fantastic. Yep, I've got a few HR executives I was speaking to on the Friday Free For last week that were saying that this is actually was the reason they wanted to do HR, and they've been so caught up with compliance, and all of a sudden they're being drawn into more strategic, important conversations and providing support for their teams, and they're reigniting the passion that they had for their profession. So it's an interesting time in the HR industry. So well done, Sonia. Your HR boardroom slide share is working. So back to you. I will just, you'll need to unmute because I did mute you.
Unmute. You can now hear me. Great. Thank you, everyone. So yes, welcome to our inaugural first HR boardroom session. I'm really pleased you could all make it. Today is really what I've noticed. This is my first time outside of an organisation going through something that's quite significant. So I was the GM of HR of the Super Retail Group, GM of HR for that group when we had the GFC. So there was a lot around that time. You may remember that a lot of businesses, large businesses, were going under, whereas Super Retail Group was able to weather the storms. And there were so many moving parts to it. And reflecting on it, leadership was one of the key things that came through. It was clear, it was decisive, and it was brutally honest. But also being quite empathetic to, who it was impacting and how it was impacting people. I've also worked in the cruise line industry on ships. So my heart goes out to, all those crew members, the captains, the navigation team, the engineering teams, hospitality teams that work on board, because I know what it's like when there's an outbreak on board. And the protocols that need to follow. And when you're out at sea and you need to get back into port and communicating with the guests and with the crew members, we had up to 1,200 crew members on board, and they all play a role. So I tend to empathize with what's happening. And when I hear the newsreels of, just send them back home, I said, do you understand that if they get sick and they're at sea, who's going to help them? You don't have a Coast Guard that goes out that far. You're just basically sending them out saying, look after yourself. It doesn't quite work that way. So I feel that, just drawing on my experiences with previous crises in different organisations, not to the extent of this pandemic, and also looking at today, saying there's so much information. Are you overwhelmed with the amount of information coming through? Yeah? It's probably quite a bit. And what I want to do today is just synthesize it in a way that gets us to really challenge our own thinking, challenge our mindsets, and saying, what are the questions that we need to be asking if we have a board, the boards that we're working on, or the boards that we work with, the executive teams, how do we ask constructive and challenging questions? How do we look for that? And how do we prepare? So a lot of us have shifted into working from home, the majority of people, and now they're saying, okay, we're trying to get a rhythm, we want to look after our people, but where to from here? So what I'm hearing from different organisations is we're not quite sure, we're waiting on information. We don't know, we're just trying to get used to our rhythm today. The reality is we have to have a lens on both. What we're doing today and how we're going to recover. And that seems to be more and more of the conversation. So hopefully today you'll walk away with that, more of an understanding about what are the now current discussions around organisations, whether it be the entire organisation or within organisations. You can adapt the information presented today to suit your complexity and your needs. At any time, if you want to chime in and ask a question, please feel free to do so. So I've been working in my own HR consulting business for the last 3 years, and it's been really interesting working with organisations, but not specifically inside organisations. So I guess I've got a unique lens of taking multiple perspectives. I know what it's like to sit with the board, with executives, with team members on the ground when there, 3,000 people are being made redundant. I understand the pain that they go through and the pain that the organisation goes through, and how do you lessen that impact, on the customer, on our people, on the whole business ecosystem. And it's not easy, right? Because you're still trying to navigate and people are still trying to look through. And trying to look for some direction. So this is what I'm going to cover today. So the last session will be Q&A, but I really want to draw into some of the work that Deloitte has just recently released around the board experience and their principles. And it got me thinking about this whole care and expertise and leveraging people in the organisation. Leadership in two specific ways: resilience of leadership and trust. We'll talk about also some research around the 8 habits. Jane would be familiar with that because we worked on that a little bit earlier, last year actually, and how that tool works with dealing with ambiguity and navigating through rapid changes. There's been some new methods or techniques that organisations are looking to that are a lot more rapid in the approach of trying to make sense of the world and trying to define some possible future scenarios and then plan towards them. So it's called scenario planning with a bridge to the future. What does that look like? And then we'll have time for Q&A. I do have a couple of polling questions and I hope you'll have fun with it. I do want to make a point that there's a number of people that have said to me, it's really interesting leaders. They've either gone really quiet or they're communicating on a regular basis. And see, the thing is, when we're in crisis, we all respond differently from our personal viewpoint. So what we think is the right way to respond or behave or enact. And it's just a natural way because that's how we've been shaped over the years. But really now's the time for leaders to have that clarity and navigate the complexity. They need to look at the new reality as well as keeping an eye on today. And providing direction for their teams, even if it's just a guide, that's okay. It doesn't have to be 100%. So what are the leadership habits that are needed to influence that and be visible and be authentic with it, to engage and inspire the organisation to not, I guess, sit in fear or sit in anxiety, but help them lift out of that. So what does this look like at all levels of the organisation? And it is interconnected. So I'd like to see what steps have you taken already. There's only a handful of us. I'm curious to know, you can choose more than one. Ensure the safety of the team. You can just put in how many you want to tick. So what steps has your business or your organisation already taken so far? The results in?
Yeah, the results are in. 60%. Oh, 50. Oh, no, it's just changing. Okay, 67% at cutting non-essential costs. Oh, hang on. Not everyone's got theirs in. It's changing in front of my eyes. It's rather fun, isn't it? It is fun.
It is fun.
Can you see the polling there?
No, I can't see what your screen has, but that's okay.
Okay. Has everyone, okay, 7 of 7 have voted. Anyone ready to vote? Okay, I can end the polling and I can share the results.
Oh, woohoo. So we've got cutting non-essential costs, rethinking how business will shift to the new normal. Well, that's great because that's where we're targeted today. How do we shift to the new normal? And cutting non-essential costs, that's really interesting, and meeting with the leadership team more frequently. So not surprising because this seems to be consistent with businesses overseas as well, from what I saw with a similar set of questions. So that's excellent. Ensuring the safety, prioritising initiatives. Is that a surprise to anybody? No, not really? Okay. So let's keep that in mind because that's what we'll focus a bit more on. So according to Deloitte, the way in which boards engage and respond at this time is a critical factor in the organisation's ability to kind of manage a current crisis and push through to recovery. So here are the key things that Deloitte has found by surveying organisations. that are doing this more effectively. The tone from the top matters. So the board itself needs to support each other and executive teams during uncertain times. And they're in the unique position to reinforce the culture of the organisation, and to be inclusive for the mental and physical well-being. This is including their respective board members. So, if there's been disharmony either in the executive team or the board team, they need to try and find a common ground about how do we want to relate to one another. It's really important. The other part that Deloitte has found is that they said they need to challenge the board's operating model. They may have been used to operating in a certain way with a certain agenda, with a certain focus. And they're saying that they need to revisit structures and to support the short-term challenges with that view on the long term. So leveraging the expertise around the table of the board members and having those board members sharing those expertise in a different way with the management team or with the executive team. So a number of boards or executive teams have had subcommittees specifically set up to deal with the crisis relevant to their organisation. The other thing for them was to be flexible. So at this time they can be they may be sitting on multiple boards. Is anybody sitting on multiple boards at the moment? Yes, no? Raise of hands. Can you see anybody, Lynn? Need to unmute.
In the chat room might be a good place to answer that question. Certainly from my point of view, I'm advising lots of different clients, which is like sitting on different boards. I used to sit on boards and lots of multiple boards, but clients that you're advising all have the same issues. They're need a new operating model.
Yes. So, and also their time is going to be constrained if you're sitting on multiple boards. So that's going to be a challenge in itself. So I know with one respective board member, they sit on a large insurance company board, and also they're the head of a large healthcare association. So they're, where do you split your time between, right? Especially if it's, taking more meetings and more times with, not only with the organisation that you work for, but also the boards that you sit on. So whilst the board is about the immediate view, they also need to have the view to the long sight. So Deloitte is saying that boards that are more effective or organisations that are more effective need to have both. They need to be talking about both because it keeps things in balance. And also gets the right questions being asked, which is the last part about asking deliberate questions. And asking deliberate questions that's going to help you through the current crisis and what you're needing to address, through to what does it mean for us longer term? What is the impact probably there? So for them, they're going to really rely on the executive team and expertise within the organisation and externally to help reconcile what does it mean specifically for the issues that are facing that business.
I found that some boards that hadn't had any experience with remote or video conferencing really found they were struggling, right. Especially if they had board members that used to fly to Perth for their meetings, for example, and didn't have anyone local to show them how to use the technology. That's been quite an interesting, it's raised a big issue around risk management, making sure boards have a backup and can video conference and have the technology, the platform and the skills, and that they actually practice it before it's actually needed. So this has been another aspect that they've had to add to their risk management streams.
Cool. Yes, getting on board, like many of us, the rest of us. So that's thanks for sharing that. It's interesting because I think it's only until you're thrown into it that you're forced to learn it sometimes. I was on a recent
something to that. I'm as you know, very interested in culture for boards, and one of my beliefs is it's very important for directors to get out of the boardroom and down onto the dance floor, as they say, and actually speak to stakeholders and customers and staff and everyone really, to get a feel for the temperature or the pulse of the organisation. So that clearly is much harder to do at the moment. So I'm on the board of a school, and they've got all sorts of issues they're trying to deal with at the moment. But one of those is trying to understand the impact on the staff who are trying to deliver remotely what they're used to delivering in person, so learning quickly a whole lot of new skills and having to do that quite urgently. They're trying to stay on top of the well-being, the mental health of the staff, but also the families and students at home, trying to cope with all this as well. So as a director, you really do have to change your focus a bit, look up from the board papers and have lots of extra conversations with the principal. And we've got a new principal started last week as well, so he's hit the ground running. But the executive staff, and just really try to keep tabs on how everyone's travelling and what support. So we've offered to bring in extra coaching, extra psychological counselling, all sorts of extra support that we wouldn't normally need to consider.
And do you find that you're getting the information that you need from the organisation, or are you searching for it still?
Well, we're still working out best ways to get hold of that information as we induct a new principal as well, who's getting to know his team. But no, we're certainly meeting more frequently via Zoom, keeping in closer touch. You've got to watch the politics of it a bit as well. You can't have everyone randomly checking on everyone else. It needs to go through the chair, and you just need to have your lines of communication sorted out as well. So we're working through it as we go, but it's an interesting set of challenges, new challenges.
So would you say then that it sounds like any discussion around the board table of how protocols may change or may need to be amended to help cope with a new way of engagement or a different level of engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. We're inventing it as we go, and we're having to tighten up our delegations, how things work and who can make decisions and who's in contact with who. So yeah, but in a way, you learn these techniques under crisis conditions and they serve you well down the track. So, so good learning for everyone concerned. And it's also making relationships closer than they would otherwise be under normal conditions.
So that's great. And do you find that the other board members share the experience from other committees?
Absolutely.
Okay.
From other committees or boards and from their day jobs. And you do try and have a broad set of skills around the board table. And it's interesting what's bubbling up now to the surface that we didn't need to tap into some of these experiences or skills that some of the directors or even the executive staff have had before. But they're able to reference back to other situations or other knowledge that they have, and it's making us all better at our jobs, I think. But we do need to watch the burnout for the staff.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, Jane. See, it's really insightful because we have a mindset or a view on how things used to operate, but now they're operating differently, and we are learning as we go. It is clear that through a recent webinar I was on with Women on Boards, that they were saying that there's strong divergence of views about how this pandemic, how this crisis will impact businesses, the economy, the whole ecosystem. So, which one do you follow? And there isn't one way. It's what does it mean for your industry, your business, the people, what's the relevance for your country, the regulations, the changes that you see coming through. So if we look at it, so leadership in the board level, the culture at the board level, how they interact absolutely spills into the way the executive team are going to handle it. And I've seen that firsthand as well with my experiences with previous organisations. So how the board thinks, feels, behaves, acts absolutely sets the tone from the top. And it also, the executive team set the tone for the rest of the organisation. And you were saying earlier, Jane, about being that visibility. It's so important. People want to see you, even if it's a video, a short video, a message. I don't always want to read something. They want to see you. And often people say, I feel better because I saw the person. So getting comfort, executives and senior managers getting comfort around the fact of how do I make myself more visible to the organisation, even if it's a short message. If it's a subcommittee dealing with a certain an area on crisis management, whether it's health and wellbeing, maybe encourage executive and the board member to share their thoughts and their views with the rest of the organisation. So the Heart of Resilient Leadership I thought was a really good article that was also recently published, and it kind of synthesizes around, what are the things that need to be front of mind. And so they were saying that resilient leaders they're genuine, they're empathetic, they walk in the shoes of others, but they also keep an eye on the financials and non-financials, saying, okay, let's balance this out. Yes, we can provide the support and the care. Yes, we want to hold on to as many people as we can, but what's the balance for us? And those are really tough conversations, but it's done with empathy. And that's where it leads into, what is the mission? What are we trying to do? And in a crisis, leaders will come together and try and filter, what is it that we need to not shrink to, but more so adapt with our employees, our customers, our suppliers, all at the same, taking a rational approach to protecting the viability of the company in the short term, as well as trying to protect the assets and the finances of the organization, so there is a recovery at the end. And you would, and everybody hopes for that recovery, but as we all know, hope is not a strategy. So putting that mission first is kind of a really good, I think, beacon to go, why are we here? What are we trying to focus on? The other part is around the aim for speed over elegance. I remember doing board paper after board paper, providing information after information, getting more sources, getting more, just to validate or try and address concerns. But we don't have that luxury in this time. And it's really about making an informed decision with speed. It's about risk-taking, and it's a higher appetite for risk-taking in some respects. And this is about, okay, what do we do if we cut too deep into letting go our people? If we cut too deep into our expertise, will we be able to recover down the track? How do we keep our talent and performance going? So some really key decisions, and this is where expertise around the table needs to be sought. Your customer groups, your supply channels may be different, but the whole thing is making informed decisions with speed. Communication, the adage communication. Well, that's one thing. I think what's even more important is actually owning the narrative, being visible to seize a narrative from the very beginning, being transparent about what is happening, and inspiring to others. So it's kind of having that realistic, that authenticity. Again, I'm still hearing a combination with different organizations, whether they be insurance or not-for-profits or the hospitals. So I get regular feeds from the private hospitals as well. And they're kind of saying, okay, I'm getting them almost every day. They're actually saying, this is what we're doing. This is how we're helping our doctors, our nurses, allied health. These are the scenarios that we're playing with. This is where we need your help. They're very specific in their communications, and they're owning it. So they're very clear. They don't waffle. They're just concise. They're straight to the point. And here is where I need you. And that here is where I need you is that call to action where people start to feel that inclusiveness, saying, oh, okay, how can I help? But being very overt about that seems to resonate with people a lot more. The other thing with resilient leadership is embracing the long view. Again, this actually is a waterfall from the board, right? So it's kind of saying, staying focused on the horizon, fostering collaboration, improving the business in the best way it can. How can we embrace the new changes, a new way we work, the structure of the way we work, and how we deliver on our commitments. And those commitments may have changed. The decentralized work model is the biggest one that I think a lot of HRDs, a lot of executives are trying to get their head around. And then we've got the other piece around decision-making and governance around decision-making. Has that changed because of a decentralized working model? If it has, how has it changed? And if it's changed and how it's changed, how does that impact us? And these are really important conversations to help say, okay, are we on track? Are we where we need to be? Is, where are things, what's missing, what's falling between the cracks? And this is an ongoing dialogue. So all of these elements or fundamental qualities have one thing in common, and that is and that's trust.
And just adding to that, Sonia, too, in terms of trust and achieving all those fundamentals you've got there, it's actually a huge opportunity to build a reputation and trust in an organisation if the crisis is handled well.
Yes.
If you're seen to be empathetic and communicative and transparent, you can actually come out the end of it in a better position than you went in, potentially.
Yes, does that resonate with others?
Yeah, I've got 2 clients who've dealt with things very differently, you know, almost in the extremes, others that have kind of been in between. But one client that was very, very proactive, very early on, basically made a decision before the government did. Everyone's going to be equipped with what they need to work from home. Let's get that happening. We can see it's going to be likely. And we don't want to put anyone at risk, and we want to make sure we're set up before everyone else is falling over themselves. So they managed to get laptops for everybody. They were right on board. They were decisive. They gave everyone jobs to do. They had people going out getting sanitizers, making sure everyone had sanitizers in their own homes, all this sort of stuff. Another group that decided and are still working in their offices and will stay in their offices until there's a government decision that they aren't to, because they can socially distance within their office, and made it very quiet in terms of the way they communicated to their teams, because they felt that there was that much information out there, it's just overwhelming. So for all very well justified reasons, you know, they'd made 2 very different decisions, and talking to the teams on the ground, the teams with the decisive direction or almost quick, strong decisions that the leaders were owning about changing and putting safety first. The teams are feeling, saying things like, we really are so glad, we felt so cared for, we were amazed at how quickly our leaders made these decisions. And the other team that are sort of business as usual, let's keep going, are like, you know, we haven't heard anything, we don't really know what's going on. Even though there's all this other information out there, they were feeling that they weren't getting enough from their own leaders. You know, so I fed that back to the leaders that I think you need to be, you know, fair enough, there's a lot of information out there and they are all adults, but you do need to be getting them together. So they pulled them all into the boardroom and basically said, this is how it's going to be. And for this reason, it is because we want to hold on to your jobs. If you will work from home, we will have to let go of at least 3 or 4 of you, because your jobs are all predominantly about filing and doing things in the office, and we want, there's no work for you if you go home. And once the team realised then why they were making this decision, why they hadn't been over communicating, then they were a little more happy, but a bit of the damage had been done.
Yeah. So that's so that the damage would be done to the trust piece, right? That's where fundamentally where it goes. So this is where I saw this on Facebook. I thought it was really funny. And where have all the freaking chips gone? But just replace the chips with, where's but the collaboration gone? Where's the support? Where are the resources? Where's the accountability? You know, where's the communication? Where's the trust? You could see people kind of freaking out to say, you know, how proactive have we been? How have we tried and engaged to understand what are those needs? So there are some things that we can anticipate, but there are other things that we actually need to ask people about. So people often say, you know, what is it about trusting leadership? How do you define trust? And a useful way that I get leaders and managers, execs to really talk about is saying, okay, where is the trust missing? Let's talk about this, because this is fundamental. Otherwise, more stories, people are going to make up their own assumptions, and that's what will travel around. So let's find out why. So I find this really, it's called capacity for trust. So you'll see around it, it says, you know, is it a trust of character, trust of capability, trust of communication, or trust of caring? So there are different ebbs and flows within trust, and being able to give people the language or walk through them to say, okay, help me understand where you need to see the trust. So sometimes I'll say, I just need more communication, but is it more communication? Where is the trust lacking? And this trust in leadership, perhaps is it trust in caring? So you'll see that, uniting in challenges or showing empathy. Is it in communication? Or is it about, do we have the right people around the table? Defining how to solve for some problems or anticipate what's coming ahead. Is it around, I never trusted that person or leader to begin with. Now I really don't trust them. Where do I go? So all of these dynamics happen with trust. But let me focus in on communication, because that seems to be the one that often comes to the forefront. Admitting mistakes and telling the truth is really, a careful balance, saying, how do I admit my mistakes? And then how do we say we work through this together? And giving that constructive feedback. Nobody wants to hear bad information or sad information or information that impacts not just others, but themselves, right? So it's kind of like saying, well, how do we trust communication, that it is constructive, that it is inclusive, and it doesn't come from one worldview, that it comes from multiple views. Leaders can sometimes, in crisis, and I've seen this personally, others may have as well, where leaders respond to what they think the answer is, because they feel the pressure to respond, rather than take into consideration, well, how I see the world at this time may not be how the others see it. So how do I reframe? So I'm curious to know from you, in your organisations and teams that you work with, where do you think the trust is low, and where do you think the trust is high? You can put it in the chat. Any thoughts people want to share?
I think trust in character is most important, because I think if you have trust in character, everything else is a byproduct of that.
Okay. Yeah.
It's also the harder one to have.
Anyone else? Yeah, the trust in character, that trust in leadership, yes. Certainly says a lot about a person. But let's face it, we're not all the same. Not all leaders are the same, and we all have different styles. We know that. And how we communicate and interact with people changes. But the only way you're going to know how to respond, to communicate or own their narrative, is to really know about yourself. And if you don't know about yourself, the leader doesn't really understand where they're at with how they're responding to their crisis. They're going to wonder why they're not hitting the mark. It's marketing because they're not helping me properly, or someone's not briefing me effectively. But maybe sometimes in this time, you actually need to get someone outside of your circle to coach you through this, to help you through it. Be a sounding board that they're not, they don't have any shared interest. But only just to help you be better at what you do. So a lot of leaders would have gone through leadership programs. They would have got some styles, reports about them. I encourage them to take them out and go have a read of it and say, how are you behaving? And what do you want to do that's different, because you feel like you're struggling, or you're not getting the message through, or you're not coping. And why is it that you're not coping? Because of different leadership styles. There's also recent research with leading through ambiguity and 8 habits. So I won't go through this in any great detail, but you've got to understand your leadership. But more specifically, the research is around leading through ambiguity. And there was with Adaptic Minds in partnership with QUT, they identified 8 habits, and these are the 8 habits, and you might find them, well, they're pretty obvious. It's how well we keep practicing them. So you'll see the quote, "We are what we repeatedly do." In different situations and depending on our personal preferences and styles, what habits do we need to be actively practicing? And this is the same with leaders and maybe, you know, peers giving advice to each other. How does that extend to, you know, a healthy, more collaborative way of working and an honest way of working with each other? Because no doubt people come together and it makes people bond strongly, but also it could also push them apart too with divergent views. So how can you practice being more effective? So with resilience in leadership and trust in leadership, there are 2 key elements. And here are some tools when I talk about the 8 habits. So now that we've talked about leadership, let's talk about when the rubber hits the road around navigating through rapid changes. We don't have the time or the luxury to kind of like have endless meetings, participate in those meetings, wait for people to go and come back, have a lot of thinking and, you know, trying to sift through the opinions. So there is a way that we can actually help to facilitate remotely more of a collaborative approach to shaping moving forward. So I'd like to know where people see, and this is the other poll, where people see your priority right now.
That'd be fantastic. Appreciate that. Cheers. Okay, see you.
So is everybody in, Lynn?
There's the results there.
Okay, future opportunities. That's well, spot on to what I've been seeing as well happening with larger and smaller organisations. So ensuring long-term viability, 60%.
It would have been interesting to have done that a few weeks ago, and probably giving confidence to team would have been the highest priority. And once that's settled, now then focusing on what the new normal is going to be.
Yes, it would change. Absolutely, it will change. And it goes to show that depending where we're at with managing the crisis, we'll have different focuses or priorities with that organisation. But yeah, developing planning scenarios. I know in the private healthcare sector with the fertility clinics and health scope hospitals, I've been seeing their communication specifically saying, can you help us with developing planning scenarios, which we'll be talking about soon. So
and I've got clients that get funding from a different range of avenues, and so they're looking at what happens if we don't get the Commonwealth funding that we've been, you know, enjoying for the last 12 months. What happens if, you know, what are the areas of the organisation that will have to retract?
yes.
You know, what are the areas that will have to grow?
Yeah,
so they're
exactly.
probably doing more of that planning right now, actually, because it'll feed their long-term viability.
Yeah, and that's a whole thing. It's around, if we're not doing our scenario planning about what's coming in now, where we're at with managing the crisis, how do you help inform the long-term viability? The two seem to be a balancing act between the two of them. So it's not just about getting through today, absolutely, but it's also developing the scenarios of going, okay, that longer term. That's great.
And also, Sonia, I think it also depends on how this crisis has affected your business. I mean, for some people, it's had a negative impact, and for other people, they're getting business, and you know they've got work coming in from all sorts of directions. So it also depends on where you sit in the scenario.
Yes, that's right, Donna. So their scenario is, will our demand drop off once everything else picks up? So what's their scenario planning around that? And there was, I was watching the late news, somebody talk, I can't remember his name. Oh gosh, I can see his face, but I can't remember his name. And he was saying this, whilst the retail sector and the Woolworths are going up with sales and they temporarily have an increase in workforce, it's now starting to plateau. So for them, even though they're up high, they're starting to plateau a little bit. So there will be, what does it look like when we're a distillery and we're making hand sanitizer? Do we want to still keep doing that and go back to making gin, or are we going to keep to making hand sanitizer because it's more profitable for us? Well, what is it that, or you've got to have two different businesses? So they're, absolutely, there's scenario planning for people, organizations that are actually thriving and others that are, feeling the impact at various levels. But it's a good point though. Thanks, Donna.
Yeah, from a Business Women's Australia point of view, it's quite interesting because I was doing a bit of scenario planning yesterday in terms of when people were able to meet again and want to network and want to go face to face. What will be the mix between what we've now built as this enormous online capacity, and then how do we then, the focus might be on occasional meetups and more online as opposed to what it was before all this, because I think that what we've shown is that it's the online people are really enjoying. So we don't want to lose that in terms of our future scenarios.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So I'll press on with developing plausible futures. Jane, you remember those days where we were sitting together and we spent hours doing these plausible futures and developing the context about what does it look like, and then resources from a political, economic, technological viewpoint. So how do we do that on steroids? How do we get those principles? And it's a sound approach to use. But how do you do that when you're kind of going through rapid changes? So I've facilitated these types of sessions with teams, either enterprise-wide or within divisions of organisations or within functions of organisations. So HR, the risk management, audit, the supply chain, distribution, overseas sourcing. You can actually go enterprise, or you can do it at a functional level, because the impact of a crisis or an impact of a change of business or an acquisition means that different parts of the business will be impacted differently. So hence why scenario planning is a really versatile tool to get people involved and not just be a bystander and saying, I'm just going to wait to see what happens. So there are many resources online that you can do and facilitate the process, but it's always good to have people who have been through it and know how to work it through. Ultimately, what scenario planning does is it actually helps us to anticipate, respond, and adapt to possible futures. It's not a surprise to us. So having that set of realistic scenarios so we can organise and respond quickly. ANZ Bank has sent to me saying, if you're this size business, that you can actually now access this amount of capital. If your business is going through this scenario, you can access this amount of capital. So looking at, what are the resources and how do we respond with that? What about people? There is so much available to us that we need to synthesize that information that's relevant for us and that's useful for our business. So prioritize initiatives, reallocate resources, and develop action plans. That's easier said than done. And the other one is the mechanism to track progress, but importantly, how to mitigate the risks, how you want to zigzag through as you're trying to bridge beyond COVID-19.
Sonia, as Lynn mentioned before too, it's like Zoom with the boards she was mentioning over on her side of the country. It's all very well to have the action plan in place, but if you haven't practiced the elements of it, then it might as well sit in a drawer gathering dust.
Yes, exactly.
Your planning needs to include, I know in crisis planning, you practice the scenarios live so that everyone knows exactly what's happening when it hits. You're not scrambling, and you practice a variety of them, not just the obvious ones. And
Exactly.
questions come up in that process that further inform your planning. So yeah, it's not just writing the things, it's actually being clear that you can deliver on them.
Yes, exactly. So how do you mobilize them? You know, how do we know we can mobilize them, the activities? I totally agree. Yes, absolutely. And part of that scenario planning is recognizing that success. So I know when Circo Sodexo, they lost $300 million worth of contracts, we had to exit or transition out of contracts that have been in place for 20 years. And there was certain expertise. So there was a big concern by the Minister of Defence and, you know, senior management and the board about, you know, how do we, you know, what's a scenario around all of the critical talent leaving the organisation, knowing that we've lost the contracts. So how do we plan for that scenario, and what do we have in place, and then how does it play out? So it's really, you can really look to practicing this technique with specific situations too. So it builds a confidence of your team by doing this, and it also helps to accelerate your pathway to recovery, in my experience. So remember how I said, how do we do this on steroids? So let's break it down. I like this because it uses 4 lenses. So you'll see a lot of organizations have gone faster. They actually tap the brakes, they stop the car, they break the glass, which basically means breaking glass, you're an emergency. Like, are we actually ever going to exist post this pandemic or this crisis? So I'll go faster. Some organizations have gone faster because they've switched their operating model to serve an immediate need of the community or the market. So, and they're seizing that, and they're getting cash flow in to kind of manage their viability going forward. Pumping the brakes is saying, what part of the organizations are we going to slow down? And what do we need? Stopping the car is like your Virgin Airlines and your Qantas, or just hold it all up. What does that look like? And breaking the glass. So with the scenario planning, what's different with this canvas is that it actually gives you the 4 contexts for which to plan around. And this is why it's a rapid approach to developing how do we want to allocate resources, people, impacts, assess impacts, and have a governance system around it. So collectively, you can do this online. You can actually get expertise across your organisation to actually model the different scenarios that's specific to your organisation. The baseline is where you are at either before the crisis or where you're at now. It just depends on your timeline. And it can be done over a number of sessions. So this is suggested that it can be done within 2 hours, having your first cut of it anyway. That means you need to come prepared with all your macro information from reliable and trusted sources. So with each of the scenarios, you talk through the conditions, you know, what happens to revenue, timeline, customers, people, all those types of things, and then what is our response? And then that gets flashed out with the right people in the organisation. But it's a good way to help kind of like say, okay, I'm getting involved in how we're going to navigate through this and keep ourselves viable and protect our people and our resources moving forward. Has anybody seen this before? Yes, no? Min, can you see?
Yeah, most people haven't seen it from the chat box. What I'm interested in is looking at one of the CEOs that I think has been particularly effective in my client base. One of the scenario planning styles that he actually has driven is actually not there. His team wanted to go fast, and they've been going full on, almost driven by a bit of adrenaline. And his view has been, slow down, let's take our time and continue to operate the way that we normally would, because this is going to be here for a while. We don't need to stop. We don't need to go faster. We don't need to change anything right now. Let's just coast along and keep communicating and just move what we were doing before into an online world so that we're staying informed. And keep it's been really interesting compared to everyone else. You know, I can see all the other clients would fall into these different types of scenario kind of things, but as a scenario planning canvas, I suppose what would happen, this would be quite useful for him, because then I guess his team wanting to do things in a hurry, he can say, well, let's use this. What would happen if we did go fast? What would happen if we stopped?
Yes, and that's the whole point. You may never engage in it, but it gets people to talk about worst case scenario, best case scenario, and what can happen in between. So it's really a modified approach, a rapid approach to having those discussions, but with context. That's what's really important with this, with facilitating this type of planning of scenarios. Does anybody have any questions with that? So really, in summary, for scenario or building a resilience plan for your organisation is having multiple scenarios. You may not activate them, but you're ready for them if they do activate. And they do change according to new information or what's changed in the market, or what they do, they're active scenarios. So the team that works on the scenarios would say, is there any new information that's coming? And these scenarios can be shared right up until the board level. Show the board what the management team are doing. Show the board what the executives are thinking. You know, be transparent, because the flow of information needs to be, you know, multi-directional to go, okay, you know, are we all focused on the right things? So it's really important to share that across. So once planning the scenarios, and I won't go through these other steps because this is just part of the workshop, but it's about ruthlessly prioritising the initiatives and shifting resources to more critical activities. The roadmap, and in here it says with a rapid approach is 30, 60 and the 90 days. And the beyond bucket is kind of like saying we can't really see the beyond as yet, but we can see 90 days ahead or 6 months ahead. So, and each action plan has its own initiative that is very high level, and it could be, you know, the HR initiative around talent and performance management. It could be around the risk management function, around management, you know, managing the audit processes that they need to go through an organisation. It just depends on what each initiative for the each of the scenarios, and you don't have hundreds of them. You really distill them down according to your available resources. And the governance is what's really important about monitoring, measuring, mitigating those risks and managing it digitally. Because a lot of us, where, you know, the expertise is no longer in that one building, it's elsewhere. So this is that resilience plan for the organisation, using a rapid approach to scenario planning, giving you a context and helping your team get involved with that. So in summary, what we've talked about is really about the board experience and their principles. You know, what's been researched recently by Deloitte's. Leadership is fundamental, resilience in leadership and trust in leadership. Looking to, you know, what are those 8 habits? And now I think people are interested in knowing more about those 8 habits and how that can be grown within the team or the board, you know, in specific groups or individuals. Then you can contact me after the webinar. Navigating through rapid changes was really about saying, you know, what's one on steroids that we can do scenario planning so we can bridge to the future. So it takes leadership at all levels of the organisation, and we all need to have confidence that we're reprioritising and focusing our resources and time to really respond to current and future events. Pushing or leading through ambiguity is not just one thing, it's multiple things, but you can do it. And as Jane, you were saying earlier on, you know, we're learning along the way and we're getting stronger at it. It doesn't mean we need to be perfect, but we need to be actively engaged in getting better at it and reaching out rather than withdrawing. So it is possible to embrace ambiguity and seize opportunities, and I hope that today's webinar and roundtable discussion has helped to facilitate some thinking that could be taken back into your next meeting or discussions. So any questions?
I've found that very interesting. Thanks, Sonia. It's been really timely too. Even in my role, not so much sitting on boards anymore, I used to, but certainly in my role as a management consultant, working with clients in a strategic sense and helping them too in terms of what they might be needing to think about. I think the dust has sort of settled a little bit now, and I think that initial responses to COVID are now sort of in a very recent memory, but now it's this sort of getting into what sort of holding, almost like treading water until things go back to normal, and then what are the various scenarios that could be sort of considered, and the plan, using that tool I think is going to be quite useful, because I think things will go back to normal. It's about how long we will be treading water, and then what can we take as learnings and as strengths and as new, better ways of doing things back, so that we don't lose them. I think there is always, 12 months after things have gone back to normal, human beings go often back into a modus of operandi that is sort of a usual way of being, and the challenge will be not to learn the good, not to leave the good things behind that we have actually recognised are good.
Okay, excellent. So any final comments or questions before we go?
Perhaps what we might do, I think, is just go around everyone and get everyone to sort of check out and just talk about maybe something that really resonated with them through that really interesting and informative sharing, Sonia. I think maybe over to Donia, if you, Donna, over to Donna, if you want to share what you've what sort of resonated with you.
Two things. One, when we were talking about which characteristic we thought was important, I kind of was going towards the capability one, because I think a good leader will also recognise that some of the people that they have around them can deal with a situation or can really add value in a situation like that. Whereas if we start treating people like they just have to follow our lead, can be detrimental to an organisation. And also even trusting that people can work on their own at home and can may do it differently to how you do it, but they will still bring to the table what they're supposed to bring to the table. So I think sometimes we can't go past the capability of the people that we're surrounded by. But I also like that planning tool, and I was thinking, oh gee, it's a bit late for that now, but I don't think it is. I think, yeah, for using it to go, we don't know how quickly we're going to recover from this, so we may have a quick recovery or a long recovery, but how we're going to attack it when it happens. So I think that you can use the tool in the future for planning for situations like this, but also use it now, because how quickly are we going to come out of this, and or how slowly are we going to come out of this. But thanks, it was great. Really, really loved the session.
Thanks, Donna. How about you, Claire? Do you want to check out with your key takeaways?
Well, my key takeaways are really more about the character of leadership. I mean, I still go back to that, because I think that that's much more sustainable in terms of determining whether a leader is good or not. You know, you can learn certain skills, but if it's not inculcated in your character, and if you don't believe in it, you know, I don't think it'll last very long. I think that if the team can see that their leader, you know, has integrity, sorry, has integrity, tells the truth, good and bad, shares, you know, information, so not on a need-to-know basis, but truly collaborate, since, you know, everyone's got skin in the game. I think that all the other traits in terms of, you know, capability, trust, that just naturally or automatically is evoked from the team, you know, especially in the face of uncertain times. So, you know, I'll just go back to that slide where we were talking about the you know, different capability sets of leaders. And I just think that character is most important. There are people that are born to be good leaders, and there are people who, you know, learn those skills, but inculcate them into their own character, so it becomes part of their belief system. And that there are other leaders who, you know, learn the skills but haven't mastered the art yet of absorbing it into, you know, what they do every day. And so, you know, they'll make mistakes from time to time, and that's fine as well.
Thanks, Claire. It's one thing's for sure out of this is that having experienced a crisis, anyone who's been in a leadership role is going to be a better leader as a result of this, whether they handled it well and have got a lot to learn, or whether or not they didn't handle it well and have even more to learn. So we had a bit of a theory the other day about chatting to some friends of mine about the different leadership styles, and we wondered if those who had experienced a tragedy or something, crisis in their own lives, seemed to be more resilient as human beings and therefore more capable in this kind of scenario. And those that had never had any sort of crisis were really struggling because it's the first crisis they'd ever experienced. And so, you know, even that, it'd be interesting to see if there's any studies that come out that actually do any correlation analysis on that. How about you, Anita?
It's interesting you just made that point. There's that story about in the US they were trying to create a biosphere in the desert, growing some of it might be an urban myth, but it's got a good story. They're trying to grow trees in this bubble of an environment, and what they found was, long story short, the trees were very unresilient in the real world because the things that made them strong weren't there. There was no wind in this biosphere, so all the things that were factors in creating conflict and difficulty weren't encountered by the trees, and so they were actually hopeless. So you're absolutely right. We all know this. It's the things that you go through that are hard and bad that grow you and that you know that you've learnt from. So I just wanted to comment on that. But I really liked the 4 kinds of trust in leadership, and agreeing with Claire's point about the character. If you've got the character thing, you've got everything. And I think people want leaders that take the fear away and link shields with each other so that they feel like they're all on the same team. So managing those expectations and establishing some what's the word, boundaries within the uncharted territory. I know we're going to hear that word a lot. Is really, really important, because human beings are really scared about this. There's so many things that are unpredictable, and that's been really hard for people to manage. So thank you for that particular slide. I really like that one.
Thanks, Anita. That's a great analogy. A great analogy about you know, being in a safe environment and growing up in an environment that hasn't actually tested you, and that's where whatever doesn't break us, what is it? Whatever doesn't kill us, makes us stronger. Exactly.
The other example of that is the story about the butterfly that needs the cocoon to test out the wings. So when people try and help the butterfly by taking the cocoon away, it doesn't work. So the strength is from fighting through the cocoon. So it's another, you know, metaphor.
Great analogies. And yeah, thanks, Anita. That's excellent. Jane Crombie, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Anita was saying, I think some of the younger generations, the age of my kids in their 20s, this is the first time they've ever realised that jobs are not there necessarily when they want them. Kids are a bit inclined to move from job to job, and if it doesn't suit them, and now some of them don't have jobs suddenly, and I think for the first time they're realising perhaps the value of that. So that's not a bad lesson probably, but also we need to watch that younger generation if they're employees, if they're vulnerable employees, watch their mental health and how they're coping, because they're not necessarily resilient under these conditions because they haven't necessarily faced hardship.
Absolutely true.
But yeah, I agree. In terms of the trusting capability, I think it occurred to me as I was listening that as a member of a board, you do need to trust that your executive are going to be able to handle this and actually get out of their way, and be careful not to hammer them with extra requests for information and make their jobs harder when they're already very busy and under pressure. So I think that's the takeaway I've got. And one thing that really twigged with me was, Sonia, you mentioned videos, just so people, if they can't actually see you, but they can hear from you. And I think as directors, it would be great if you just did a very short message of support from each individual director, just cobble it together, send it out to the community, because a lot of those people never ever get to see you. And now is a good time probably to hear something supportive or reassuring or empathetic from you. So that was a great idea that I'll action. Thanks, great session.
Thanks, Jane.
Fantastic, thanks, Jane. I've been thinking about my 25-year-old. Willie will be 25 at the end of this year. He's one of those kids that has had to learn the hard way all through life. And this time last year, he was offered a full-time employee contract with a hotel chain. And he decided not to take it because the hours he could get as a casual with the loadings and the extra hours he was working really long hours, 6 days a week. He was just, bringing in 90 grand. And he goes, if I go on a full-time contract, I'll be down to 50,000. And he did actually admit the other day that he probably made a bad decision there, because the guys who took the contracts have all got jobs in the botlos. So he's out of work, and it's just one of those things. It's who would have thought he was going to have to learn the lesson this way? It's just like,
you're absolutely right. I have a millennial daughter who's 19 at uni, who has never known that you can't get everything in a shop and that there isn't always everything there. It's like, what do you mean there's no toilet paper? What do you mean there's no pasta? And has never seen an empty shelf. And not that I have either, but I grew up with parents who had been through that kind of thing. So it's just so interesting to see that the whole thing about resilience in these young people is a really good character building thing for them, I think, going through this experience and having some disappointments. My daughter was going to go to Harvard for summer school in June and now can't go. And she's never had big disappointments. And I guess that's, again, coming back to the resilience, that's what makes you grow, is coming through those hard times and having to do a plan B.
My daughter qualified as a lawyer and did a year and decided she didn't like the law last year. So she sailed off to New Zealand to have a gap year.
Yep.
And I said to her the other day, so she gave up the job. What are you thinking now? She said, at the moment, I would welcome an opportunity in shelf stacking. So she gets it.
I know we can't help having a little giggle. We know it's not always going to be like this, but it's a lesson. What a great generation, because they were the generation that had it all a bit easy, and it's only going to make them even better, even more amazing than they already are. And Sonia, do you want to wrap up? Final words?
I just want to say thank you very much, everyone, for contributing today, and I hope to see more of us attending the future events. And if you want to share any ideas with me of what you'd like to see at a HR boardroom discussion, please let me know. Just email me, send it through, and we can put together a focus on that issue or topic.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Sonia. We've got everyone's contact details, so you'll be the first ones to hear about the next topic for the HR boardroom, and it'll be a month away. I don't think we've quite nailed the date. Can't remember if we've nailed the date, but it's a Thursday morning. Would a Thursday morning suit everyone? Because this Wednesday morning is a bit tricky for me, because I actually normally on client work, but Thursday morning every month might work. Would that work for you, Sonia?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, we might shift it by a day, but we'll send out details. We've got some great ideas for hot topics, but if you've got any in particular that you think would be worth bringing into the boardroom, then please let us know. So thanks very much, everyone. Absolutely wonderful to have you on board, and we look forward to seeing more of you all.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thanks so much, Lynn. Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Right.